On the island of Barbados in the Caribbean sits the picturesque Christchurch Parish. It's just like a lot of churches all over the world, complete with a quiet graveyard where many of the island's inhabitants end up for their final rest. However, in one tomb in this cemetery, the dead are anything but at rest. It's called the Chase Vault, and it is at the center of one of the island of Barbados' most chilling and sinister mysteries. The Chase Vault was first built by the Honorable James Elliot. The vault was majestic, made of carved stone, coral, and concrete walls over 2 feet thick. At the entrance was an enormous blue slab of marble sealing the tomb in peace. The first occupant of the vault was James Elliot's wife, Elizabeth, who died on May 14, 1792. A few years later, the vault was purchased by the Walren family and was opened to receive the body of Miss Thomasina Goddard. However, upon opening the marble slab of the front of the door, the pallbearers were puzzled and shocked to observe that Miss Elliot and her coffin had completely disappeared. The reason for the disappearance of the coffin was never determined. The vault eventually ended up in the possession of the Chase family, hence the name, and the first member of the Chase family to be buried there was baby Mary Ann Marie Chase, who died at the age of 2 on February 22, 1808. Her small lead coffin was placed in the vault and the marble slab was put into place where it would remain for 4 years. In 1812, Mary Ann's older sister Dorcas died under what some would say were strange circumstances. It was rumored that the girl had been abused by her father, Colonel Thomas Chase, who had a reputation of being cruel and sadistic to his family and slaves. Some say that Dorcas was unable to live with the abuse any longer and starved herself to death. Her coffin was added to the vault. Only a month later, Colonel Thomas Chase himself committed suicide, and when the pallbearers opened the vault, a grisly sight met them all. Inside the tomb, both of the little girls' coffins had been seemingly thrown about and were lying in a haphazard fashion on the vault's floor, with one coffin left upside down. The first thought the men had was that the tomb had been ransacked by grave robbers, but there were no valuables in the tomb to steal, and the heavy marble slab used to seal the place up had not been moved. Despite the mystery, the 2 coffins were straightened and the body of Colonel Chase was added. The Chase Vault was sealed once more. 4 years later, the vault was again opened to admit the body of 11-year-old Charles Brewster Ames. Again, coffins inside the tomb had been flung about, even the 240-pound lead coffin of the colonel. By now, the story had begun to spread around the island, and 52 days later, when Samuel Brewster, another member of the Chase clan, was due to be buried, the vault was inspected from the outside for anything out of the ordinary. They found that the vault was airtight and watertight and that nothing could get in or out. However, upon opening the tomb once again, they discovered the coffins had apparently been violently disturbed. This time, however, one coffin was not out of place, the coffin of Thomasina Goddard. However, it had sustained heavy damage from another coffin smashing into it so that Mrs. Goddard's skeleton was sticking out. By this time, the news of the moving coffins had reached the ears of Barbados Governor Lord Cobermere, who decided that the puzzle of the vault must be solved. Lord Cobermere ordered that the vault be inspected and made impenetrable from the outside. He then ordered that sand be sprinkled on the floor so that footprints would betray any human or animal intruders. Finally, the governor's seal was placed into the fresh cement of the vault seal as an added precaution. This was the way that the vault remained for 2 years, and, during those 2 years, the curious islanders who wanted to get a look at the infamous Chase Vault reported strange sounds and howls coming from within. The vault had garnered a very foreboding reputation. It was time to open the vault, and Lord Cobermere, along with 8 slaves, a group of able-bodied men, and 2 masons, made their way into the cemetery and towards the tomb. As hundreds of onlookers watched, Lord Cobermere ordered an inspection of the vault from the outside. Nothing was deemed out of the ordinary or amiss. The vault was just as sturdy as it was the day that they first surveyed it. The marble slab was removed, and terror greeted Lord Cobermere's eyes. The coffins were again violently disturbed and flung about like toys. One coffin was actually leaning up against the door, making getting into the vault difficult. Mariana's lead coffin had been thrown so violently that a piece chipped off. There were no prints in the sand. No one had entered the vault. Detailed drawings of the scene were made. By this time, the Chase family could take no more and had the coffins removed from the infamous vault. They were all eventually buried in plots out in the cemetery. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator and writer of Sherlock Holmes, proposed along with others that the disturbances were caused by the spirits of two inhabitants of the vault, Dorcas and Thomas, who had committed suicide and therefore were cursed and restless. The fact that the coffins had started moving only after Dorcas Chase was buried there seemed to support that hypothesis. There were other explanations, of course, such as human tampering, earthquakes, and explosions, but they were all ruled out. Explosions and earthquakes would have disturbed other vaults in the cemetery, and human tampering was dismissed due to the fact that the vault seal had not been broken. The marble slab was so heavy it would have taken 8 men to move it, and the coffin blocking the door would have made escape for human tricksters impossible. The most popular theory, disregarding the supernatural ones, is flooding. If the vault had filled with water, the coffins, even the metal ones, would have floated. But if the coffin movement was caused by floodwaters, why was the sand on this floor not disturbed? How would it account for the damage done to the coffins as though they had been thrown with great force? Why wasn't flooding observed in any of the other tombs in the cemetery? The Chase Vault is not the only example of coffins moving around by themselves. The curious vault at Stanton in Suffolk, in which coffins were displaced several times under mysterious circumstances, is one other example. F.A. Pauley told of another example when his father was the rector of the parish of Gretford near Stamford, England. His father noted that 2 or 3 times the coffins in a vault were found on reopening to have moved around. The incidents created some excitement in the village at the time and of course brought out every superstitious belief that existed in that tiny village. The incident was quickly hushed up out of respect to the family to whom the vault belonged. Today, the Chase Vault still exists, but it is empty and has been for almost 200 years. No one has tempted fate by allowing a family member to be buried there. Due to a lack of scientific readings done at the time, some have speculated that the creeping coffins of the Chase Vault never existed, and that the entire incident was a hoax. However, the Chase Vault does exist, and records show that a Chase family did reside on Barbados at the time, and perhaps the most compelling evidence of all is that the vault remains to this day empty. After all, something cannot be moved if nothing is there to be moved. Normally, this would be the end of our story had it not been for Lord Cobermere himself. Lord Cobermere died in 1891, having been struck and killed by a horse-drawn carriage. While his funeral was taking place, a man named Sybil Corbet was busy taking pictures of the Cobermere Abbey Library. When the photos were developed, one could see a transparent figure sitting in a chair, the ghost of Lord Cobermere himself. Perhaps in the afterlife, Lord Cobermere finally discovered the truth to the mystery of the moving coffins of Barbados.